Then later I'm gonna have to clean up my hard drive because I have so many files from these sessions. I've uploaded all of them for the most part to YouTube, but this will be my last one of the week.
Uh-huh.
So let's talk about assessment. And the idea really is to wrap our head around the possibilities. So traditionally, assessment is quizzes and tests. In some courses, they are very dominant. They are, there's a structure where the faculty spends, 1/3 of the course leading up to one test, 1/3 of the course leading up to another, 1/3 of the course leading up to the final exam.
Yeah.
And then they throw in some assignments and they throw in some participation attendance to figure out what the final grade is. That's a very traditional assessment process. It's also very consistent with a rote approach, an English approach versus American, in terms of throwing a lot of information at the students and hoping that they catch it. And then they just have to regurgitate that information in the form of an assessment. And tests can be different. They can look a whole bunch of different ways. They can be multiple choice, which I don't love. They can be short answer, which I enjoy a little bit more. They can be essay, which I prefer. But of course, on the flip side, then you have a lot more work to do as an instructor because you have to read all of those essays.
Yeah.
So, within the online environment, this is, test to test to test. It's, you can use essentially the same test that you would use in a face-to-face course, but there is the catch, which is cheating. So if you are giving students a, 35 multiple choice questions, and that's test number 1, if you don't lock down the browser, which we can do as instructors, then you're basically just asking the students to look up the answer and fill it out. And I don't think that's a really good evaluation of whether or not they know the information. And so this is where it diverts from face-to-face. Is I go in assuming that the students are going to look at stuff when they're taking a final or an exam, quiz, test, whatever. And I think it's a much safer approach to assume that and build your assessments based on that. So what that means is avoid a little bit the multiple choice unless you want to just give them some points. Maybe instead of each multiple choice being worth 5 points, you look at it as 1-pointers and you do 10 of them. So it's 10 points of the test. Yeah, go ahead, look it up. You assume that they're going to look it up. And you can actually do that strategically so that as they're looking that up, you're kind of getting them warmed up for the short answers and the essays that are on the tail end of that exam or that quiz or whatever it is. So, multiple choice in an online format, it's going to basically be a green light for the students to look up the information. They're going to Google it. They're going to look in the textbook. They're going to look in their notes. Assume that, okay? Yeah. If I'm going to give that kind of a test, I will spend more time on asking them to apply the information that they've been, presented with, the knowledge that they've gained from learning activities and content and mini lectures leading up to that point. And so you can have them apply that information. And if you want to really avoid cheating, quote unquote cheating, personalize it. So, John, knowing your students, if you were going to evaluate the students in a test, and I'm just going to throw this out there, I'm going to riff on it a little bit. You might say, okay, you've been spending a lot of time with the AP style guide. you know, using that information and with the style guide right next to you, here, you know, choose 5 types of stories that might be written and identify 2 to 3 things out of the style guide that would help you better write those stories. Right?
Yeah.
And so it really, I mean, where are you going to find information out on the web that's going to give you that specific answer? It personalizes it for them to a certain degree. If you want to take it a step further to really avoid that from happening, then you can say, in your own experience and using examples from your own life, answer X, Y, Z. Again, that's not something that they can just copy off the net. You know, a bad example of a student cheating on a question like that would be, you know, I remember when I was growing up as a young woman, and it's a male student who's writing that, you know. Now, granted, they could have been, and they could not transition, but could have. But it's just, you know, by that point, you probably, especially you, John, you probably have a sense a few weeks into the semester about how the student writes. You're going to recognize their flow. You're going to recognize the kinds of words that they use. And so it's going to be really hard for them to copy. Excuse me 1 second. My wife is sweeping outside, and I don't think she realizes that she's making noise. Not that you can hear it, but I don't think you can.
But that's okay.
It's all right. So, you know, if you personalize the questions in terms of the test, then it's really hard for them to steal that information from another place. And I tell them, look, if you're going to copy and paste, you better be slick about it. You know, make sure you check the font, make sure you check the color of the font, you know, whether it's the one thing or another. And sometimes I'll see it right in the answer. It's like, you clearly copy and pasted this from 3 different sources and cobbled it together as your answer. And that was my mistake. And so I've gotten better at personalizing and making it harder and harder for them to just take that from somewhere else. And I know that we all, depending on our discipline, we're going to assess their knowledge in different ways. But, you know, from an online, asynchronous, remote perspective, doing multiple choice or matching it shouldn't be the bulk of the points for a test or a quiz, because it's just too easy for basically a student to skate and not really demonstrate what they actually know. And that means, you know, also managing your workload. You know, don't do 30 essay questions because you're going to spend the next 3 weeks grading it.
Yeah.
Write really, you know, I would say deep, comprehensive questions, and just keep it to 5 to 10, you know, maybe a 10 short answer and then 5 longer essay answers where they would use a paragraph to respond. And that's if you're going to do a test in the traditional way. The other type of assessments, well, actually, let me stop there. Any questions about that or curiosities, John?
No, that's very useful.
Okay. Good. And, you know, if we look at all different types of assessments that are out there, one way to also approach it is to give them a case study. And so here's an example of a case study book that I've used in hospitality management. And if you have case studies, and I'm going to be creating some for part of a project that I'm working on, create case studies or use case studies that exist, and then you can refer to those as part of the assessment. So you might have them practice on some case studies as assignments leading up to the test. And then for the test, you might say, okay, look at case 13 in your book and write about it. You know, your response, your application, your interpretation, you know, give them some guidance, and then they can do that. So they'll have some training doing that earlier on in the semester. And then when they get to the test, you know, if it's a midterm or a final, you can use basically the same format. And, you know, that's a good way to see whether or not they know the information. I really try to get to application as quickly as I can in the course versus just regurgitation. Because my goal is for the students to know the information months and years beyond the course, not just days, which unfortunately too many of our courses, they just ask students to regurgitate. Because if you don't work out those muscles on a regular basis, you lose the stuff. And so in some majors, it's not a problem because they're constantly using the same things. But in some courses, especially foundational courses, you could lose it pretty quickly. So that's one thing. I want to jump into a different part of assessment, which is underutilized, which is the demonstration. The demonstration of knowledge. And so I'll use Ira as an example from film editing. You know, one of the things that we talked a lot about throughout the course was this idea of how do you manage the learning process, and how do you get to know whether or not the student has gained what they need to gain. And in his particular instance, you know, the bulk of what the students are doing is learning Pro Tools in terms of editing sound, and how do you can't give them, I mean, you can give them a little bit of a quiz or a test, but for the most part, you need to see the product of what they've learned. And one of the ways that you can do that is in a demo format. And so, you know, I encourage instructors to develop a very clear set of parameters for the assessment, where they say, okay, in this assessment, you are going to demonstrate that you know how to do X, Y, and Z. And you give them, you know, maybe in Ira's instance, you might give them a piece of film, you know, maybe it's 5 minutes long, and you give them a folder full of sounds, and they have to turn that clip, that 5-minute clip, into something different using those sounds. And again, I don't know the discipline, but I'm just assuming that that would be a thing. And the assessment is not just the product, it's also recording yourself doing what you're supposed to do. So you set up, here we go. You set up another camera, and normally I'd have a camera attached to this, which I can do. So I have this camera, and I attach it right here, okay?
Yeah.
I attach it to this little thing, which is called a Gorilla Pod. And you can set it up. This one might be a little bit more difficult. I don't know where it's caught. But you might set it up right behind you so that it is watching your keystrokes and watching what you're doing on the screen. That second. And then you send that recording on to Ira, you know, so Ira would receive all these videos, and that would be what he grades based on not only the finished product, but also the process that the students did. That way they can't just borrow, you know, one from another student. And it doesn't matter how many times they do it, as long as they get it done. And so they might record the video 17 times, and they might work on the final product 17 times before they get it right, but it's okay, because they're demonstrating that they know how to do what they need to do. So that's another way of looking at assessment. Video, I think, is really important for demonstrating what we can do, you know, with our students in terms of knowing whether or not they get it. And you just have to lay it out so that they know how to record, and, you know, where should the camera be, and the whole point of it. So does that make sense, John?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah. You know, with your discipline, it's, I think there's some in-between strategies that would work in terms of them demonstrating their ability to utilize the AP style guide, or finding things in the paper, or writing in a certain way. The nice thing is you can give them a piece and then they can send it back to you, and that's a good assessment of whether or not they know what they're supposed to know, they catch what they're supposed to catch, that sort of thing.
Right. Yeah. I've got a trove of raw copy that needs to be edited. I've never told. I have a very good friend I work with who is a prolific writer, but he's sloppy and he doesn't have a style book. And so he pays me to clean up his stuff. And I could say, Bob, get an AP style book. They're about $25, and get Webster's New World College Dictionary.
Right.
Or you can put the word in the computer and it'll tell you in the computer. But then I wouldn't get my $25, you know.
That's what I was going to say.
But I didn't tell them though. And I did this at Hofstra. I taught a graduate course in copy editing at Hofstra for years. And I thought I've got to give them more than I give it's got to be tougher than the undergrads. So I would give them raw copy. They didn't know it. This was stuff Bob did that I'd already edited, you know. But then there's also a trove in the textbook we use. They've got just scads of intentionally badly done stuff, and with a lot of find it's built in. So I think actually in my case, I think the demo is to make sure that they actually edit stuff.
Right.
And that's the proof of that pudding. I don't know whether I would require them to record themselves doing that. I don't think so, because there's not much way to cheat on editing a piece of Bob's.
Right. Especially if you're giving different copy to different students.
That's a good point. Good point. Yeah.
I mean, that way they're not sharing it amongst themselves. And then on the, you know, I see it as a good opportunity for their portfolio, you know, along the lines of what you said early on, which was the ability to go to an editor and say, here's what I've done, and some of the stuff that I fixed from your own paper.
Yeah.
But you have the original copy, and then you have what they edited side by side as part of their portfolio. It's kind of a neat thing to be able to show.
Right. And also there's a week-to-week demo. There's a week-to-week demo for every student, in that they have to find things that they would have done better in the New York Times.
Right.
And you can't cheat on that either. Each student's doing that independently. And so that's a week-to-week demo rather than a sprint to this big thing. What do you got there? It's something that's your muse, sir.
Yeah. So, John, meet some of my cave dweller friends, Sarah and Kara. So where is it? There's John. So I'm in the middle of an online pedagogy course right now, session. So, so I do this, John, pretty often. And we do a breakout, and I think we're all in academics, yeah? Yeah. So what we're talking about is how to do better assessments online. So John John, you want to say hi?
Hi, folks. How you doing? I think I seem to be a guinea pig here.
But I do these sessions a few times a week, and John is one of my loyal instructors, and we learn together. So what are you guys working on?
I'm a speech pathologist in a public school, so I'm working on a summer order.
Okay.
That was supposed to be done in July, but, you know, it's what it is.
Awesome. And you, Kara?
I'm actually
Well, oh, we lost you at the end there.
Where it, delivery of content. So that's good.
Cool. And how about you, Kelly? What are you working on?
I'm sorry, what?
What are you working academically?
And then, hi, Kelly.
Hi.
Damien was saying he's doing an online course right now, and his online partner, John, is also joining us for our breakout room.
Oh, okay. I was wondering. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unique setup.
Hi.
So, Sarah, you're in Rhode Island?
Yeah, actually, I didn't even know it was your Rhode Island. That never happened.
Yeah, I haven't seen anybody else.
I'm going to turn off my mic, guys. But
Okay. Okay.
Nice to meet you, folks.
So are you also
so that's I participate in these caves.
Like higher level academia, like college?
I do these cave days, and so in the middle of it, I'll do a session, an online session, and with you guys, and it's just funny that the moderator for this one said that she was going to do this thing where she brings all the people with similar backgrounds or purposes, and so this is the academic group. But there's a lot of academics, so it's pretty funny. So
Interesting.
I'm in 2 Zooms at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's good.
Oh, that's great.
But yeah, so getting back to assessment, sorry we got distracted because they came on, but I think there's a lot that you can do, and if you give them different copy, I think that's a good way to separate it out. But then it's more work for you because you can't look for the same things in the same copy, or maybe you just do it random. Maybe you have 3 pieces of copy that you give to 15 students, and so they may not necessarily get the same ones.
Well, you know, Damien, one of the courses that I've taught, one of my favorite courses was a practicum where I required every student to write something every week,
Okay.
or else do a major project or 2. They had their choice of that. And so I was grading individual separate papers from every student every week. And I also, it was a lab course, so I could take about half that class time that was set aside to have one-on-one conferences with each student. There were some things, mistakes that were made across the board. There were other things that you want to talk with the student privately so the student's not embarrassed. But the feedback on that was terrific. I mean, that was people said, yeah, that was the most helpful thing. I even had that did that with the opinion writing course last spring. And one of the students signed up for this copy editing course because of that. And so I had to add one-on-ones to copy editing, which I hadn't done before. But okay.
No, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always it's a testament to your skills as an instructor when a student comes back to your course, not just because they were required, but because they want to.
Yeah. I had one set of students who started with Intro to Journalism when they were freshmen, and there were like 6 students, and they would take the class, and then I'd see them down in the lunchroom together, and then lo and behold, they'd all show up for the course the next semester and so forth. I had them I thought, my God, I'm responsible. I'm turning these people loose. They're going to walk out the gate into the world of journalism, and I'm responsible for everything that they either know or don't know. So anyway, graduation came, and I'd never been to a St. John's graduation. And they said, have you ever been to a graduation? I said, no, I don't go. The only graduation I went to was my own at Ohio Wesleyan many years, 50 some years ago. And they said, well, you're coming to ours. And they insisted. And then so Paulette and I went to the graduation because we had to see these. But those were my students. But yeah, so anyway, that's a digression. But my point of this was when you say, well, it's more work to give them all different stories to edit, and it's more work. I'm used to that.
Right.
That's not a. I agree. Well, I only have 14 students. So
Yeah.
if I had 40, that would be much more difficult.
Yeah. I will do one-on-ones with them at some point, but not every week, not every 2 weeks. It's just, that would be killer. But I will always give them the opportunity to meet with me if they ask for it. So
Exactly. Yeah.
good stuff. Well, I think we're at a good stopping point. Actually, I'm gonna jump back into this because they want to say hi. But
Yeah.
that was kind of fun. But I'll be putting out an email this afternoon to see what other things people want to get into. But there's a whole schedule for next week that I've already mapped out, and we'll continue to do it.
Okay. Good. Thank you very much, Damien.
You're welcome, John, and have a great weekend. Say hi to Paulette for me.
You too. Hi, Paulette from Damien. She's in the other room making money. So
Hey, that's great.
for later. Yeah, she types in the front end of a computer and money comes out the other end. It's
Like Google.
a wonderful thing. Thank you so much, Damien.
All right, take care, John. Have a great day.
Okay, you too.